All right. Welcome to the Dave Barry Show. Oh, no, good evening and welcome to Politics and Prose at Union Market. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of the bookstore, along with my wife, Lissa Muscatine, and we couldn't be more excited to be hosting Dave, who's here to talk about his new book, Class Clown. This is Dave's millionth book. No, actually, it's more like, I think it's more like his 46th, which is still a lot of books. And for all the statisticians out there, the total breaks down as 29 nonfiction and 16 fiction. But the new book is different. It's a memoir, as the subtitle says, The Memoirs of a Professional Wise-Ass, How I Went 77 Years Without Growing Up. Now, Dave reveals at the start of the book that he'd been worried about doing a memoir, worried that he isn't famous enough for people to care to read his autobiography, but somehow he got over that concern, presumably with encouragement from his publisher, and maybe the profit motive had something to do with it. And we're all really fortunate that he did, because the book is very entertaining and engaging, as so much of Dave's writing has been. His comedic talents were evident when he was growing up in high school. As he recalls in the book, he was elected class clown, hence the title, and he often got his classmates and even teachers to laugh, but his teachers also told him that while he was funny, he shouldn't expect to joke his way through life. Well, obviously, he did not listen to them. In college, he wrote funny stuff for the college paper, and he then took a serious job as a reporter at a local paper for a few years and spent a year with the Associated Press. Then he veered away from journalism for a bit, working 7 years as a consultant, trying to teach business clients to write effectively. You can imagine how that went. But he also wrote humorous pieces on the side, and one in the Philadelphia Inquirer caught the attention of this gentleman right here, Gene Weingarten, who I'm sure you all know from the Washington Post, because he was with Miami Herald at the time, and the Miami Herald hired Dave and brought him on board as a columnist in 1983. 5 years after that, Dave won the Pulitzer for commentary for, as the judges put it, his consistently effective use of humor as a device for presenting fresh insights into serious concerns. So Dave stopped writing a regular column 20 years ago, but along with his books, he's continued doing occasional journalistic pieces, including the hilarious annual year-end reviews. How many look forward to them as much as I do, right? So we all hope, Dave, that you never stop doing that. Anyway, after 77 years, the class clown has definitely proven that he's in a class by himself with his knack for zeroing in on the absurdities of life, using humor to disarm, deflate, and delight, and reminding us, as his parents advised him, never to take anything too seriously. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the inimitable Dave Barry.
Thank you. Well, that's pretty much the entire book. So, any questions? No. Wait, not yet. I'll seriously ask for questions later, but I'm not asking you, because, no. Okay, apparently, yeah. So, yeah, I was, in fact, elected class clown. And I was, in fact, told you can't joke your way through life, which turns out to be untrue. You can. I was not sure that it was a good idea to write a memoir. I was sort of talked into it by my agent and my editor, and I still am not sure it was a great idea. At the time I wrote this book, they were saying, like, memoirs are hot. A lot of people are writing memoirs. But a lot of the people writing them were really famous people. Like the biggest memoir when I was writing this book was Barbra Streisand's, and it was 970 pages. And it was Barbra Streisand's really famous, it turns out. Like in the book, she says at one point that she was on the phone with Warren Beatty, and then she hung up, and she said, after I hung up, I wondered, did I sleep with Warren? I don't remember. Maybe one time. And I'm thinking, like, I cannot compete with that, you know? I know for a fact I never slept with Warren Beatty, whatever he may say. So it was like, it was intimidating, but I did it. I plunged in, and I talk, the first chapter of the book is different from the rest of the book. It was really an effort to talk about where, because the question I got more than any other question and still get more than any other question is, a lot of writers get this question, where do you get your ideas? And you know, the real answer is, like, I get these ideas because if I don't have an idea, I'll have to get a real job. You know, you don't really know where they come from except for desperation. But it was an effort to, like, look into in my own case where I thought my sense of humor came from. And so it's the first chapter of the book is more serious really than the rest of the book. It talks about my folks. I had like I grew up, I'm old, I'm really old, 77 years old. I grew up in the 50s, and I talk a little bit about that. Like, it's kind of weird looking back, because a lot of the things that you think never really could have possibly happened, that we just pretend happened, really did happen. Like, I really did crawl under my desk numerous times to avoid an atomic bomb. We were told to do that, and we took it quite, okay, this is grown-ups are telling us there's going to be an atomic bomb, you better be under the desk when that happened. And it seems stupid now, but it seemed really stupid then, because if a desk is going to protect you from an atomic bomb, put a big desk over the whole city, and we'd be good. The whole educational system was radically different in the 50s from what it is now, like, and things that you could not get away with now. We had gender-based education. So the boys, several periods each week, when I was in Herald Sleek Crittenden junior high, it was back called junior high, not middle school then. The boys, several times a week, would go to shop class, where we would learn over the course of 6 months how to take a large board and make it to a smaller board, stained brown, which you gave to your mom. And the girls went to home economics, home ec, and put on aprons. They actually put on aprons and baked stuff. They baked cookies, which was preparing us all for the future, when the girls would be at home baking brownies, and we would come home from making smaller boards out of larger boards. And so none of that worked out. None of it was, but that was our education. But the main focus of the beginning of the book is my folks, my parents. That's really where I got my sense of humor. I had two very funny parents. My dad was a Presbyterian minister. He didn't have a church. He operated a social work agency in New York City. And he was just a wonderful guy. And he was funny. He was like dad joke funny. He liked to laugh, which is why he married my mom. My mom was really, really, really funny. Really dark, but really, really funny. Fought with depression her whole life, which ultimately defeated her. But during that life, she used her darkness to make us laugh a lot. I'm going to just give you a couple examples, like what my childhood was like with Mom. We had a pond behind our house, and we lived in this little town called Armonk, New York, which was then just a village. Now it's kind of part of the mega rich New York suburbs, but then it wasn't. It was like a normal small town. And we lived in the woods, and there was this pond behind our house where we used to go play, which you would not let kids do now. But back then they had extra kids. It was the 50s. Like my family, we had 4 kids, so they could spare a couple, And we would go play in the pond. When I was really little, we would go play. And I remember, like, my sister and me, my older sister Kate was a year and a half older than I was. We go into the pond. We go to tell my mom, we're going to the pond to play. A normal mom of that time would go, well, be careful. And my mom, like in this June Cleaver voice, would go, don't drown, kids. And we go, we won't. We thought that was pretty funny, She was like going to a dark place and taking something she was terrified of and making a joke out of it. And she always did that. She used to take us on with her when she ran errands in Armonk, as housewives did in the 50s. And we'd go to the cleaners and go to the drugstore and go to the grocery store. Anyway, there was this market, Brissetti's Market, on the corner in Armonk. And she'd go in there with us, and all the moms would be shopping, and Ray Brissetti would be behind the meat counter slicing bologna or whatever, and he'd see her and brighten up. They all loved my mom. All the tradesmen loved my mom. And they go, "Hey, Marion, how you doing?" And she'd go, "Just shitty, Ray." And that was different from other moms, And I knew it was funny. I didn't, not quite sure. One more. This is like when it was getting darker, but she was still funny. When my dad died, we had this big memorial service. There was one in New York City and one in Armonk, and he was much beloved. And a lot of people came. And then after the service, we took my dad's ashes, just the family, and went to this little rural cemetery near Armonk. And they had dug a hole for my dad's ashes. And it's just my mom and me, my two brothers, my sister, and it's a rainy, gloomy day. And we're walking to the grave. We put my dad's ashes in the grave, cover them with dirt, and we're saying stuff, and we're hugging each other, and we're crying and weeping, and it's just really sad and moving and whatever. Then we're done finally. We decide we're going to leave my dad's grave, and we turn and walk away. It's raining, and my mom is on my arm, and she looks down and reads the gravestone and goes, "So that's why we don't see him around anymore," Like, even in that moment, she was funny because she was always funny. And my dad would have loved that joke. That's why he married her. So I'm going to summarize the saddest part of it. My mom committed suicide. My dad was an alcoholic. The book is not a sad book, and it's not about that exactly. But I kind of felt like I had to talk about those two things. I had the happiest childhood you can imagine. My parents never inflicted their problems on me. My dad recovered from his alcoholism and became a very active in the Alcoholics Anonymous and helped a lot of people. That's the kind of guy he was. My mom didn't recover from my dad's death, and she ultimately took her own life, which was brutal, and I talk about that quite a bit. So it's like the easy version is, well, the reason he's a humor guy is that he had this pain when he's a child. And it's really not what happened. I had no pain. My parents were wonderful, funny people. But that's sort of where it came from, is two people who had flaws. And I kind of think of the book a little bit as a tribute to my mom. I couldn't ever tell her, because by the time she died, I was not that, I hadn't done what I've done with the rest of my life. But she's the reason I did it. So anyway, that is the most depressing part of this talk, I promise. And it really wasn't that depressing. But I did want to talk about it because that was that's where my sense of humor, his sense of humor came from. So anyway, I went to college. I wrote a bunch of humor columns for my college newspaper. I went to Haverford College. Our motto is, "We never heard of you either." And what I really did a lot of in college was smoke pot and play in a rock band. It was the 60s. And I wrote a bunch of humor columns, though, because I thought, I thought I was going to be funny. And I enjoyed doing that. 25 years later, I had a college reunion. And when somebody had, by then I was a well-known humor columnist, and somebody had blown up a bunch of my columns and put them around the room where we had the reunion. We're reading these columns, and they weren't funny at all. At least I didn't get any of the jokes in them. I mean, that's probably because I, at the time, was not smoking marijuana anymore. So maybe it's But after I didn't ever say, if you'd asked me then, what did I want to do, what did I want to be, I would have said I would like to be, I'd love to be a humor writer. I'd love to do that. When I was getting out of college, Art Buchwald was the giant, and Irma Bombeck and Russell Baker and people like that. And I thought that would have been great, but I didn't see that I would ever be doing anything like that. There was no obvious career path to that. But I did like to write, so I got a job at a newspaper, a little newspaper in Pennsylvania called Westchester Daily Local News, which was extremely local, and I covered extremely local things. Like I covered some municipal meetings that are probably still going on. I wrote all these incredibly boring stories. But I also wrote a column because it was a little paper and they let you do that stuff. And so I could write a column on the side. And I began to develop what became my voice, which was, you know, a guy who was kind of making fun of the conventions of journalism. I was always glad that I worked in a newspaper, because when I ended up writing for a lot of newspapers, mostly what I did was, you know, violate all the rules of journalism, but I was able to do that knowledgeably because I knew the rules, because I had to follow them for a long time. So anyway, I got this job at the Daily Local News, and then I was there for a few years, and I thought I needed to move up to the big time, so I went to the Associated Press, which was a terrible mistake. Not that there's anything wrong with the Associated Press, it's just not a really good place if you want to write humor. They're not big on humor. They're not even big on like long sentences at the Associated Press. So I hated the Associated Press. I called it the word army, and I just wanted out. And a friend of mine's dad desperately needed somebody for this little company he ran. So he hired me to teach effective writing seminars to business people, and that's what I did for the next 7 years. I would travel around the country. I would, you know, with a briefcase, and go into like a plant in like Kingston, South Carolina, and have, you know, 32 chemical engineers who expected to be bored shitless for a week. Sit there, and I'm supposed to talk to them about writing business reports and letters and memos. And that's when I kind of developed humor as a speaking thing, because I had to keep their attention somehow. So I made jokes about language. I don't think I succeeded in making people better business writers. I don't think that the nation's business writers are better now because I was doing that, but I did try for 7 years. But while I was doing that, I was also on the side writing a column a week for the Daily Local News back in Westchester, Pennsylvania. This wasn't my main job. This was like almost basically a hobby. They were paying me a little over $20 a column, but I did that. And then my big break came when I wrote an essay about natural childbirth in 1980, because as you may know, the baby boomers discovered how to have babies. We invented the idea of childbirth classes, which until then, I don't know how people had babies, to be honest, without classes. But we had these classes, and all the boomers took them. And it was like, you know, you were going to learn how to deal with the contractions, which we called it. Nobody mentioned the word pain. And we would get in this little room and pass around like a plastic scale model of the cervix, and we'd all admire it, you know. And you don't know where that thing's been, but we would talk about how to have a baby, and there was like many weeks of these classes, and then the point of the story that I wrote was that when you know, all this talk build up to like how we're going to have this experience with the contractions, and you're going to breathe a certain way, and it's going to be great, and you're going to have a natural childbirth, and then when you actually get into the moment, it's like a whole lot of women just going ah, you know, screaming for drugs. In other words, it was very different from the from what it had been built up to be. And I wrote an essay about that, about having a baby. And it was wildly popular with boomers. And it happened that they were, because they were all having babies at the time, and a lot of them were having positions of authority in newspapers. They had risen to things. One of them was Gene Weingarten, who's sitting right here, who read that essay. A bunch of people read that essay. And I got a bunch of calls at home. The first one came from an editor at the Chicago Tribune. And I'd been paid $350 for that essay. The Philadelphia Inquirer paid me. It was the most I'd ever been paid for writing anything. And I get home, and there's a call from this guy at the Chicago Tribune. He says, I read your piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer about childbirth, and I'd like to run it in the Tribune. And I'm like, great. And he's like, so how much do you charge? And I'm thinking, well, I got $350, so everything else is gravy. So I said, well, how about $50? And he goes, well, I'll pay you $500. So if I'd opened with 25, he might have started with 1,000, is what I'm thinking. But the point, I was not good at that, but I did see a really important thing here, which is that like there was maybe another path for me, like besides sitting in a room full of engineers or chemists or accountants and telling them to, for God's sake, just get to the point. I could maybe start writing humor like and make a living doing that. I was in my 30s at this point. And so suddenly I'm getting calls and attention from editors all around the country. One of them was Gene, and then ultimately I got hired by the Miami Herald, where this gentleman, this is Tom Schroeder and Gene Weingarten. Yeah. And it was the best job you can possibly imagine. It was the most wonderful time you can possibly imagine. We worked for, it was Tropic Magazine, it was the Sunday magazine, the Miami Herald. And these guys were running it, so it was ridiculous. It was like Animal House, but journalism. They had money, they had budget, and they didn't care. I mean, their their goal was to tweak things. It didn't bother them to upset. What they didn't want to do was bore people. And so they kind of used me as like a tactical assault humorist. We did these stories that involved the readers. Like, okay, one of my favorite stories was the Miami got an NBA franchise, the Miami Heat, and the next year Orlando got an NBA franchise, the Orlando Magic, and both teams are going to suck for years, clearly. So we decided we should have a rivalry. Us in Orlando, we decided to create a rivalry. So they sent me up to Orlando to write a story about Orlando to start the rivalry. And I wrote a story, and it said, like, it's time to end this bitter feud. There was no feud. We were making the feud up. Between the good people of Miami and the low forehead, nose-picking yahoos of Orlando. It was like that was the tone of the story. And the cover, Gene, you want to tell them about the cover? I'll tell them. It was Gene's idea. Gene's idea for the...
I do want to say that the editor said it was the only mistake she ever made in her life.
Did you all hear that? The editor said it was the only mistake she ever made in her life. Gene came up with this idea that the cover would be me wearing a Miami Heat jersey, spinning a basketball on my finger. Guess which finger, Gene? And we did that. And Tom and I both said, there's no way this is going to be the cover of the magazine. That was like the stupidest idea. And so we shot it both ways, this finger, but also this finger. This is the finger that we ran on, and like it was the cover story and it got quite a bit of attention. Anyway, then but the participant part, the reader participation part of that is we rented a bus. And we ran a contest that had the readers of Tropic Magazine make up cheers, nasty cheers about Orlando. And the winners were all allowed to get on this bus. We all rode up to Orlando. We had to stop halfway up to get more beer. That's the truth. And when we got there, the Magic was prepared for us. They had created our section of the arena. They put yellow crime scene tape around it. And they put baking soda spilled it all in the aisle to make it look like cocaine around it. So that was our, then. We did a story, this was Tom's idea. The New York Times in 1986, I think it was, did a big story about Miami. This is 1986 now. They sent a team of reporters down, and they did a really timesy job of it. And they discovered that Miami had drugs and crime. And they ran this big, it was very timesy. It was like 5 years way too late, and we knew all these things. But they ran this giant story, it was the cover story of their Sunday magazine, Can Miami Save Itself? And the answer was, of course not. This is pathetic, drug-ridden, crime-ridden. So we thought, well, okay, since the Times has done us this favor of coming all the way down here to see if we have any, why don't we go up to New York and see if they have any problems? And so they sent a whole team down. We sent me and a photographer named Chuck to New York for 3 days, and I came back and wrote a vicious essay about the situation in New York, and that was part of the reason I won a Pulitzer Prize for that. So anyway, these guys gave me the best possible job in American journalism, but I also had the best readers in American journalism. I loved my readers. My readers they made my column. They gave me so many ideas. I used to send out cards telling people they were alert readers. I got so many column ideas from my readers. But I even love the readers who hated me. There's like a lot of what I call the humor impaired out there. And they were great too. They provided me maybe with as much material as the people who loved me. I have this card. I show it in the book, a picture of it. It's one of my favorite pieces of mail I ever got. It was a postcard. This was all written in capital letters. I haven't read a single one of your columns since you shit on the little drummer boy, and never will. And I'd written a column about Christmas carols that I don't like, and I don't like that Christmas carol because, for one thing, it goes on as long as dental school. And for another thing, I don't like the premise of it. If you have a baby, a newborn baby, do you want a kid coming in with a drum, right? Also, there's a line in there, the ox and lamb kept time. No, they didn't. The ox and lamb didn't keep time. Also, drums don't go rum-pa-pum-pum. Drums go rat-a-tat-tat, okay? So I'm still a little bitter about it, but anyway, I got that response there. I wrote the column that I wrote that got probably the most angry response that I ever got in terms of just number of letters was, yes, thank you. So, and I want to stress ahead of time that, first of all, this was not the point of the column, and second of all, Neil Diamond is a very talented human being, a wonderful songwriter, composer, but maybe he could have done a little better with the lyrics that go, I said, to no one there, and no one heard it all, not even the chair. Like, no shit, Neil. I mean, these are pieces of furniture. Like, probably the table didn't pick up on it either, but so that wasn't the point of the column, but man, did it get a lot of attention. And I got all this mail from the really passionate Neil Diamond fans, like, how dare you, this man is a genius, Mr. Barry. He has helped me in so many ways. I listened to Heartlight 14 times, and it cured my goiter, Mr. Barry. Like that kind of mail. So I wrote that's actually good when you get a hate mail as a columnist. It just gives you another column. So I wrote a column about like the Neil Diamond people, and I got a whole lot more mail from people who totally agree with me about that and wanted to bring up some other question. They don't like. And I ended up writing a whole book about that called The Book of Bad Songs. And people say Americans don't care about the issues. People will still come up to me and tell me, like, you know that song about the horse with no name? I hate that song. That's true. This is totally a digression, not that anything isn't, but I had a friend, Rich Jenny, who was a stand-up comic, and his joke about that used to be, you're in the desert, you got nothing to do, name the fucking horse. So, anyway, I did a lot of and again, this was thanks to Tropic Magazine, because we had money back then. They could send me on trips, and it was like anywhere I wanted to go, I could just go and do a story. I got in a situation with North Dakota at one point, what happened was I wrote a column making fun of North Dakota, which nobody should ever do. Don't ever do that. And they got even with me. First of all, I got an angry letter from everybody in the state, which was nearly 115 letters. And then they invited me up there in January and dedicated a sewage lifting station in my honor. This is true. If you go to Grand Forks, North Dakota, for any reason, such as your plane has crashed there. There is a brick building, and on it, in foot-high letters, it says Dave Barry Lift Station number 16. And in it is the equipment that lifts the sewage, which is a concept I do not understand. I mean, I would leave the sewage down there, you know what I mean? But in North Dakota, they lift it. That's how bored they are. So I was up there, and it was the cold. First of all, it was cold as I've never been that cold. It was way below zero, but a crowd actually showed up for this. And they had put a brown piece of paper over the sign on the side of the building. And the mayor of Grand Forks read a proclamation very eloquently declaring, comparing my work to the production of human excrement. And then at the big moment, they had me tear the piece of paper down. I remember seeing my name on the side of the building and smelling the sewage in the cold North Dakota air and hearing whoop, 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 which is the sound of people applauding in mittens. So a couple more. I'm just trying to relate some things that got a lot. One of the proudest moments I ever had, and this is like my readers were like so good at like if I asked them to do something stupid, they were there. They got the whole point of the column. I led a crusade at one point. This was in the early 2000s. There was this big problem with telemarketers calling people at home. This is back when people still had landlines. And the telemarketers were calling people at home, and there was a bill in Congress to ban them from doing that. If you didn't want them to, they would be not allowed to do it. The American Teleservices Association, which I believe is headquartered here in this very city and represents the telemarketers, fought that in court. And they argued that they had a constitutional right to call you at home, and there would be this law would violate the Constitution. So I wrote a column about that, and I said, well, that's an interesting issue, and you know, do they have a constitutional right or don't they have to call you at home? Let me know what you think about it. No, wait, let them know what you think about it. And I put the phone number of the Teleservices Association in my column. And the New York Times ran a story about the result. The New York Times and USA Today both, the following Monday, they had to completely shut their switchboard down. They could not get any calls in or out for days. The American Teleservices Association, they were really not happy with me at all. They were inconvenienced by this. Of course, I was heartbroken. But my readers were wonderful, and much of the book is sort of dedicated to them. I would say my mom and the readers are the main, and Jean and Tom, of course, because I love them very much. So anyway, then the other part of the book talks about, the column part was the main part of my professional life, but I also started writing books at some point, which meant I started going on book tours like the one I'm on right now, which is talking to you, which has been an interesting experience. I've been on, I don't know how many book tours. I think I've been on more book tours than any living author in the world. And I've had a lot of, you'll do anything on a book tour. You become a complete prostitute for your book. For example, I believe I tell a story, but I'm not sure, but I was, this is back in the 90s. I was on tour with some book, I don't know what book, and I was staying at a Hyatt hotel in St. Louis, and I got a call from my publicist saying that the Oprah show was trying to get in touch with me, be on Oprah. And of course, that's very exciting if you're an author. You really want to be on Oprah. So, yeah, I called the number. They said it was an Oprah producer, and she said, "Okay, we're doing a show tomorrow." Then, just so you know, the Oprah show was produced in Chicago. So, doing a show tomorrow. We'd like you to be on the panel. We think the show is going to be called "Things We Do in Secret," and it's going to be like a panel about things that you are ashamed of doing. And you're going to confess to something you did, and then you're going to make it right on the air. Do you have anything that we could use for that show so you could be on the panel? So I'm thinking, I would confess to the Kennedy assassination to be on the Oprah show. So I thought of something, which is that a few years earlier, I had been in a Hyatt hotel, and I'd been in a Hyatt hotel, and there was a sign in the bathroom. It was a plastic tent sign, and it said, "Our towels are 100% cotton. Should you wish to purchase a set, they are available in the gift store. Should you prefer the set in your bathroom, a $75 charge will automatically be added to your bill, which is their way of saying, if you steal our sign, we're going to charge you $75. If you steal our towels. So I stole the sign. And again, I took it home, and we put it in the guest bathroom, and we had it for years, and we enjoyed having the sign from the Oprah show. So that was fine, and I told the Oprah producer, about that, and she said, "That's perfect. You'll tell that story on the air. We'll have a box on the show, on the set. You'll drop the sign in the box." And then we'll get it back to the Hyatt people, and it'll be great. So I think, great, I'm going to be on the Oprah show. Problem was that I was in St. Louis. The show was the next day in Chicago, and the sign was in Miami, where I live. So I'm thinking, this is going to be bad. So I call my wife and say, you got to express this sign to the Oprah show at this place. And she calls me and says, okay, they're going to do it, but they can't guarantee it will get there. So I'm thinking, this is bad. If that's not there, does this mean I don't get to be on the Oprah show? And then I realized that I was staying at a Hyatt hotel in St. Louis. So I stole another sign. This one, they didn't have the original one, but they had one that said no smoking. So I thought, nobody's going to know the difference. I'll just pull it out of my jacket and throw it in there. Fortunately, the good sign did make it to I just threw the other one away. But my point here is I was willing to steal twice and lie to Oprah because I was on a book tour promoting my book. So the best thing about being an author for me has been that I got to join a rock band of authors called the Rock Bottom Remainders. Now, people applauding have never heard us play. We're not a good band. We play what Roy Blunt Jr., one of our members, called hard listening music. But there's some good authors in this. Stephen King's in this band, Amy Tan, Mitch Albom, Scott Turow, Roy Blunt Jr. They're a bunch of good authors, but we're just not a good band. But we've had a lot of fun over the years. I always say our real strength is endurance. Our weakness is playing actual music, but we have endured longer than the Beatles, and just to name a band. So okay. So anyway. There's one, other bands, this is what I've been told anyway, rehearse the songs ahead of time. And that's why they're good. We don't do that. What we do is we play a show and everything. We should have rehearsed that. But then it's too late, so we go to the bar. And that's it led me to a cautionary tale that I want to tell you before I take your questions. We were playing a show in New York City, and after the show, we went to the hotel bar. And at the hotel bar, I was sitting between Scott Turow and Roy Blunt Jr., two of my favorite people in the band. Roy Blunt Jr., one of the funniest people I know, and Scott Turow, this brilliant writer. So, and I had too many vodka gimlets. I'll just confess that right up front. People were buying them, and I had no choice but to drink them. So I had a few too many vodka gimlets, and I'm sitting between Scott and Roy, and I'm trying to kind of, in a vodka gimlet-y way, participate in conversations with both of them. Roy is basically just telling jokes, so that's easy. Scott is telling this very complicated story about his spleen. And I'm having trouble following it because I'm trying to talk to Roy also with the vodka gimlets. And I keep interrupting Scott, who's a really nice guy, and I keep saying to him the same thing, which is, wait a minute, I thought you don't have a spleen, because I wasn't sure, because he was going all over in time. You know how people do with spleen stories? And he kept saying to me that, no, I don't have a spleen. That's the point of the story, Dave. And then I would listen, and then I would, wait a minute, I thought, the way you are, you're just an idiot when you've had too many vodka gimlets. Finally, Scott, who is, again, the nicest person in the whole world, gets tired of me interrupting him and asking him if I have a spleen. And he takes a Sharpie, rolls up my right sleeve, and writes on my right forearm in big letters, "No spleen," which solved the problem for the evening. So then we go to bed. Not Scott and me. I mean, everybody went. Everybody. I'm not that easy, Right on my other forearm, and no. Anyway, and so we go to bed. I wake up the next morning. I have no memory of anything, really. And I'm walking to the bathroom in the hotel, and I look and I see my arm has something written on it, and I look down and it goes, "No spleen," on my arm, and I have no idea how that got there. And you know the urban legend about the salesman? He's in a hotel and this hot woman picks him up and she slips him a Mickey, and he wakes up the next morning in the bathtub packed in ice. And there's a note on his chest and it says, "We have harvested your kidney. Here's what you need to do." And I'm thinking, for a moment there, I'm thinking, oh my God, they've harvested my spleen. And I don't know where to look, you know? Do you know where your spleen is? And then finally my brain starts to reboot. And I'm thinking like, you don't need a spleen. Nobody's harvested, you know. Scott didn't have a spleen. That was the whole point of the story. Like there's probably a saying in organ harvesting circles, he's so stupid he'd harvest a spleen, you know. So the moral of that story is don't go easy on the vodka gimlets. I hope if you don't learn anything else from this book, learn that. So anyway, I could go on. There's many stories, but I think you probably should take questions at this time. Oh, and you're going to go around with microphones? Yeah, and you can keep them, by the way, at the end of the... Everybody gets a microphone. Yes, here we go. Questions. Yeah.
Hi. Do you want to just tell everybody the name of your mom?
My mom is Marion, M-A-R-I-O-N Barry, just like Marion Barry, former mayor here. And at a Democratic convention, I don't remember which one, I saw Marion Barry and I went up to him and I said, "Your name is Marion Barry. My mom's name was Marion Barry, same spelling." And he said, "Who gives a shit?" Not with his mouth, with his eyes. You know, he was fairly polite to me, considering the idiotic thing I had chosen to say. But I kind of felt I had to say it, you know. So
I Googled her to see if she was famous, and of course, only his name came up. And I was
only his, yeah.
Only his, yes.
Well,
so
she was funnier than he was.
Yeah,
I'll
I thought
say.
maybe she had some claim to
I actually
fame
can't 100% say that she was funnier than he was. 'Cause he was pretty funny. Yep. Go ahead. Yep.
Dave, I happen to have managed to survive and barely get through Haverford College.
Haverford.
About 3 years ahead of you. Haverford, no, not Harvard.
That's
which is your
correct. But if you
favorite
slurred
line.
it when you said it, people didn't always know. I want to Harvard.
So years later, this is a two-part question.
There's been no part one as of now that we know of.
Okay.
Did you take any of the math classes when you were at?
I learned that you were the valedictorian of your class. I want to ask if that's true, and if not, why not?
Well, let's put it out there. I don't think so. I did give an address at my high school. I don't remember how that happened. I think my fellow students elected me, and I gave them just the most vacuous bullshit speech ever, and I'm really still embarrassed about that to this day. I don't think I'd said anything at Haverford. I do remember I was given an honorary degree at Haverford and addressed a class then. This was years later, and I told them the story about that on the graduation day when my classmates and I graduated. It was really hot, so we just wore our robes with our underwear underneath. So I have a picture in the book of us with our standing there with our robes open and in our underwear. That's like ready to go out in the world and lead. Anyway, but you were a Haverford too, huh? Did you ever give me a noogie or something? Like you were an upperclassman. Never mind. You were respectful? Okay.
You once said I moved you from the balcony of Robert Hall.
Oh, wait, are you Kurtz? Is your name Kurtz? Brian Kurtz?
Brian, yeah, the bear.
Holy shit, is that really you? He did. There was a guy named Thurman Munson, am I not right? Who became an actor, I think in this very city. And Thurman was addressing, he was the cool actor guy, And we were freshmen, and it was like, and he goes, now some of the, they're going to take your beanies or some stupid thing. And there's some of these guys are pretty big. Hey, Brian, show them. And Brian, he's up on the balcony, comes over and leans his butt out. Would you want to show us again? And, but I do remember that moment more than a lot of other things. I don't remember anything Fyodor Dostoevsky ever wrote. And I did theoretically study him, but I do remember your butt coming over the balcony. And I also think you had hair then, did you not? Yeah, okay. Anyway, thank you for coming, Brian. Brian Hertz. Yeah, the bear. Whatever happened to Thurman Munson? Did Thurman Munson become a famous actor?
Broadway and off-Broadway periodically.
Okay. In other words, no. Yeah. Just say it. Just say it.
My wife, 58 years married.
You could have done so much better, really. Some guys still have hair at his age,
She has just forgiven me for your comments on her home state of North Dakota.
Now, they're lovely people up there. Lovely. Lovely armed people. Yeah, okay.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
I owned the Barbie doll with the rollerblades that could set underpants on fire.
Did you send them to? Oh no, you just had.
I owned it. So, and I read the column when I was a kid, owning the Barbie doll, and grateful that my brothers couldn't read at the time because they would have done exactly that. But I wonder, are there news stories? I mean, there's plenty of news stories going on that you'd want to report about, but have there been any other wacky stories lately that you wish you could write a column about right now?
Well, I do have I write, I don't know this, like, I have a Substack, which is like you can write, so I write columns. The one that I wrote mostly, there was a news story. We had a near tragedy in Miami where a boat with 32 influencers on board sunk, and they all survived. Because it went down in 9 feet of water in bright sunlight with the Coast Guard right nearby. But yeah, there's still, every day. Look where we live. Yeah. Oh, what? We have to wait for the microphone.
Mr. Berry, I'm not going to ask you where you get your ideas from, but I am curious about how you stay productive. Writing 46 books and 2 or 3 columns per week for decades is an insane amount of writing to do, particularly if you're being funny. So I'm curious if you have best practices, like you wake up and you drink coffee, or you're like, I don't work after 1, I can't be funny after 1. I'm just curious as to how you maintain that productivity.
I would say it's because I'm just way more intelligent than most people. That's my secret. And I urge everyone else to do that too. Desperation, and no drugs that I'm aware of, caffeine. No, just like, when other people, I always say this, when other people are going off to work and doing something useful, I'm looking at a screen and trying to think of something funny to say. And if you do that enough, you'll think of something funny to say. And it seems impressive to people, but when you compare it to actual work, no, it's not. It's not that hard, yeah. Yep. Oh, wait, Gene has a question, but we have a protocol here. After this man.
I'm happy to let Gene go. I know Gene from the Gene Pool. Please, Gene, go ahead.
Okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I once met your mother, and she was one of the funniest people I'd ever met. Could you tell a story about her and her car? And her car.
The car?
Yes.
Which one? There were several car stories involving my mother.
This one involved a parking garage.
Oh, yeah. I was there for this. We drove to White Plains, New York, which is the big city near Armonk. We had to go to Macy's or something. And then we come back out, and my mom can't find the car. And she's telling, the parking guy, it's a yellow Ford, 1955 yellow Ford station wagon. And my mom's a lovely person. Everybody loved her, and so everybody wanted to help. So one by one, she enlisted the aid of probably 5 people looking for this yellow Ford station wagon. We're thinking we're going to have to call the police and whatever, and we're looking around. And about an hour later, my mom goes, "Wait a minute, it's a black Chevrolet." It had been a yellow Ford for a long time, but it didn't. That ended, and we ended with a black Chevrolet. But she just hadn't had it long enough to remember that, So there's another car story I'll tell you, but I'll tell only you later because it's awful. It's awful. I really, it's just awful. It happened to my mom. All right, do you really want to hear this awful story? We promised not to blame my mom for this, because this became legend in our family. But it's awful. You're going to all go, when I tell you, you're going to go, you shouldn't have told me that. I don't want to hear that. So you still want to hear it? Show of hands, who wants to hear it? Show of hands, who's going to tell me that I'm evil because I told this to you afterward because you feel bad? See? See? Okay, our next door neighbors, the Thompsons, the 2 daughters down, Thompsons, their daughter, Penny, was a kind of irresponsible person, came to our house to see my sister, and they brought their dog, a poodle, and tied it to the bumper of my mother's car. Why you would tie a dog to the bumper of a car, I don't know. So about 15 minutes later, my mom's driving through downtown Armonk, and here's a voice, "Hey, lady, you're dragging your dog." See? Why did I listen to you? It was a horrible story. And like, the thing is, like, Penny blamed my mom for the rest of her life. And my mom, like, never saw the dog. Anyway, so that's, okay. You're sorry you asked me to do. Yeah.
Since you're here in Washington tonight, have you been invited to spend the night at the White House?
Have I been invited to spend the night? No, but I'm planning to just go and. They welcome drop-ins, right? Yeah.
Okay. How did you want the book to be called Class Clown? Why did you want the book to be called Class Clown?
Because I was elected class clown. So that's why I call it. Well, because that's kind of my job, like, so what I've always been is the guy who, the wise ass, and that's me. So, yes. Oh.
Hi, I have the mic, yeah.
You brought your own mic.
I was trying to, yeah, exactly.
Always carry one.
The scout is always prepared, so. Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you. It's more of a statement than a question. So right now, I am an editor, and I work at a consulting firm, and my job is to teach business people to write more effectively. So my creative outlet is to enter jokes every week, hi Rachel, into the gene pool. And I don't want to brag, Dave, but I am the soon-to-be crowned loser of the year for the gene pool, so I'm super excited. I got ink from you earlier this year in one of the contests. I wrote a joke about Cher and SpongeBob and the cereal comma and all that stuff. But I just wanted to thank you because I started reading you in high school. My kids started reading you in elementary school.
That's, yeah,
right.
there goes America's future right there.
And my goal is for my grandkids to start reading you in preschool. So thank you.
You're welcome very much. Hey. Any more questions? Yeah, one? Okay.
Okay. I just have to ask, and my husband can close his ears. Who do I have to bribe to get the post hunt back?
Oh, the post hunt. Well, the post hunt, does anybody, who knows what the post hunt is? Some of you, okay. It started as the tropic hunt, which you have to very carefully pronounce. And we started a Tropic magazine based on a similar event that a guy was running as a fundraiser for a temple down there. And it was this wild, it's very hard to explain. People call it a scavenger hunt, but it's not really a scavenger hunt. It's a series of puzzles set around some area. You go to the puzzles one at a time, and the solution to each puzzle is a number. Each number leads to a clue, and each clue leads, ultimately they come together and you solve this ultimate big complicated puzzle. And it was really fun. It was wild. We had people running around. Well, we started in Miami. At one point, we had a plane flying overhead that had the letters A, B, C, D, E, F. No. Yeah, it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And anyway, it was missing the letters H to O. And you had to figure out that you had a little submarine. You had to stick it in water. Big. We went for big dramatic puzzles or puzzles that involve people doing insane things. And we ultimately, when Gene and Tom came to the Washington Post, moved it up here. And for a while, it ran in both cities, but it ran quite a while in Washington. It was hugely successful here. And the reason it stopped is because I don't know. They just ran out of money or what, the newspaper business just went down the toilet. And they don't do that stuff anymore, which I always thought was the same because it seemed like more people were excited about that than the newspaper. What do I know about promotion? So anyway, I'd love that if they could come back. People still ask me about it in Miami all the time, but I don't think the newspaper business can do it anymore. And I also think Gene and Tom and I have gotten too old. We used to plan it, and the way we would plan it was we'd get together, and whatever any one of us said, the other two would say that's terrible and stupid, and we would be like that for 2 depressing days. And remember that was Anyway, it was brutal. All right, any more or? Yeah, maybe one more. Here you go.
How's your daughter doing? Your daughter.
My daughter Sophie. You're asked because she had. Okay. My daughter Sophie. I wrote about her in a book called Lessons from Lucy. Had a medical issue. It was pretty scary. It was terrifying. She's fine. Thank you for asking. She lives in New York now, and she's loving New York, and she's in the fashion biz. So thank you for asking. She's doing well. My kids are doing well. I have grandkids now, which is great. Great to have grandkids, except for that, and they love to play with their granddad, and the bad part is they love to play with you on the floor. And when you are 77 years old, the floor is like North Korea. You don't go there on the spur of the moment. Now you're going to get back from the floor. So anyway, well, listen, Politics and Prose, thanks for having me again, and everybody else, thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Can I use your chair for a demonstration? Can I use your chair for a demonstration?
Come on up.